Today we're going to talk about Ramana Maharishi. He was a great sage of India in the 20th century. He was born in 1879 in South India, Tamil Nadu, and he died in 1950. Basically, as I understand it, what his story was, when he was 16, he suddenly came home from school and suddenly he had this great fear of dying, and he laid down on the ground in Shavasana, which is the corpse pose. Everyone who does yoga knows Shavasana, the corpse pose. He laid down in Shavasana, and he had this kind of like this near-death experience, or this experience of awakening, essentially, where he realized his true self. And from that point on, he was transformed, and he went away. Basically, I guess he kind of ran away from home, and he lived in a cave on this holy mountain, or I don't know if it was holy at that time, but maybe I think it was considered holy. Arunachala is the name of the mountain. And he basically meditated in this cave for years, did his sadhana, his spiritual practice, for years. And after a while, people found out about him, and they built an ashram for him at the foot of the mountain. And then he lived in the ashram for the rest of his life. He was silent most of the time, but when people came to him, he would answer questions. And people were coming from all over the world. There is a great book by Paul Brunton. I believe it came out in the 30s. Paul Brunton was a British journalist who went to India seeking a true master, a true guru, and he didn't find any except when he met Ramana Maharishi. And it's a fascinating book. I would like to read it again myself. I have not read it for years, but that book is worth checking out. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to read. I'm going to read an excerpt, kind of like a paraphrase of something that Ramana Maharishi wrote in 1902. This is early in his life. He was only 23 years old, I guess, when he wrote this. And it's called Nan Yar, which translates as "Who am I?" So I'm just going to read a quote to begin from Nan Yar, okay? This is Ramana Maharishi. The mind should not be allowed to wander towards worldly objects and what concerns other people. However bad other people may be, one should bear no hatred for them. Both desire and hatred should be eschewed. All that one gives to others, one gives to oneself. If this truth is understood, who will not give to others? When oneself arises, all arises. When oneself becomes quiescent, all becomes quiescent. To the extent we behave with humility, to that extent there will result good. If the mind is rendered quiescent, one may live anywhere. All right, I'm just going to read. This is what I'm reading is actually from a book that I did. I've been reading from Simply A Course in Miracles, but this book is called I Am Love. It's also on Amazon, also by Alawalani, my pen name. And this was a previous book. So in this book, I had basically my paraphrase in simple language, Ramana Maharishi's words in Nan Yar. So I actually narrate just a little bit at the beginning. I say, Ramana begins by affirming that all beings desire to be happy and free of suffering, because that is their true nature. In order to arrive at this, there is a practice known as self-inquiry, which involves asking the essential question, who am I? To get at who I am requires a sifting, and this is all Ramana now, right? To get at who I am requires a sifting away of who I am not. Who am I not? I am not this body, nor even this mind. When I have inquired and seen this is so through a process of elimination, I will arrive at the fundamental I am. This I am is of the nature of Sat Chit Ananda, or being consciousness bliss. Sat Chit Ananda is Sanskrit. Sat is being, Chit is consciousness, and Ananda is bliss. I will realize this when I have gone completely beyond the world of perception. While the world is still seen and taken to be real, I will not have this experience/realization. Why? Because the two cannot be experienced at the same time. You can't experience the world of perception and the world of knowledge, which is what Jesus in A Course in Miracles also says. You can't experience both at the same time. It's either one or the other. The world will disappear when the mind becomes completely quiet or quiescent through the practice of self-inquiry. Otherwise, it will still be experienced. The mind is composed of thoughts. When thoughts subside/disappear, there is no more world. The thought of I, is the first thought that arises in the mind, and all other thoughts follow. When one inquires where this quote unquote I thought comes from, one finds it emanates from the heart. My mind will become quiet as I continue to ask where the thoughts come from, as I continue to ask, who am I? In doing this, I will go back to the root source, and as I keep doing it, eventually my mind will stay rooted in source consciousness. So it's just like the Course, you're going back to the root cause of everything, right? And for Ramana, he was emphasizing going back to the root I. Who am I? What is that I that lies at the root of everything? This practice of self-inquiry is the best and most adequate path, as it goes directly to the root source of things. Other paths are only preparations for this practice of self-inquiry. Meditation can be very useful as a preparation for this, making the practice of self-inquiry much easier. So too can adherence to a diet of pure food, which is called a sattvic diet in yoga philosophy. So this is, for Ramana, this is the highest path, right? All paths really prepare you for this. And this is also called jnana yoga, the path of knowledge, or the path of discrimination, meaning you're discriminating between what is real and what is not real, what is true and what is false, right? The true self and the false self. It is also helpful to not let the mind wander and project judgments of good or bad onto others or oneself, right? So this is also like the Course. You're letting go of judgment and concepts like good and bad, which are concepts that are really in the way. One should persist in the practice of self-inquiry uninterruptedly, continually going to the source of the I thought. So you want to do this without interruption. Keep going back to the root cause, the root source. In truth, all that truly exists is the self, and the self is where there is no longer any I thought. Right? So the self here would be God, right? The self, when he says self, this is just an ancient way of saying God, or Brahman, or the one reality, the ultimate reality, or the ground of being. And what you can call it anything you want to call it. You can call it love, ground of being, ultimate reality, self, true self. Right? So in truth, all that truly exists is the self, or is God, and the self is where there is no longer any I thought. The best devotee / practitioner is the one who practices continually and lets go of all worry. Right? So you practice this continually without interruption. The guru can help point the way, but in the end, one must make the necessary effort to attain self-realization. This is what Jesus also says in the Course, is that he can't do it for us. He can only show us the way, right? Like he's the guru that shows us the way, but he can't make us, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. He can't make us do the work. He can only show us that if he can only say that this does work, and if you try it, you'll see it works. Spiritual books also cannot lead one to self-realization. They can they can only point to the practice of making the mind quiet. One does not need to analyze the error to know it is a dream, but rather to practice self-inquiry. That will be sufficient. This is exactly what the Course is saying as well, is that you forget about, talking about all this and trying to figure out the metaphysics of it all. It's the practice that really matters. It doesn't matter what it is, what it's going to look like, or is this what it's saying? Is this what it's saying? Maybe this is what it's saying. I don't know, but that does not really matter. What matters is doing the practice. That's what matters. Happiness is abidance in the self, and that is also wisdom. No object in the world can bring true happiness, and life in the world is really misery, suffering, right? Dukkha is the word in Sanskrit, right? We want sukha, we want happiness, but we have to realize that life in the world is really suffering. At least when we're in the throes of the ego, that's what it is, right? When we don't know our true self, life in the world is suffering. When we do know our true self, it's still that, but we're abiding in our true self, so we see the world differently. We see the world with new eyes. We see the world with a forgiving vision. Spiritual powers are real, but they are not the goal, same as what the Course says, which is total abidance in the self of all. This is also wisdom, which also means having no desire whatsoever for worldly objects or complete non-attachment. So spiritual powers is just another thing of the world that you want to let go of, that you don't want to be attached to. This also isn't, this goes way back to like the Yoga Sutras say the same thing of Patanjali 2,000 years ago. This is an ancient idea, right? This is not a new idea. So what I just did was I basically paraphrased Ramana Maharishi's "Who Am I?" Nan Yar, and I think we just, I don't know if we need to say too much about that. If you've been doing the Course, if you've been engaged with the Course in Miracles, you'll see how similar this is. Is it the same path? No, it's not exactly the same. Obviously not, because, for example, Ramana doesn't say anything about Jesus or the Holy Spirit, or I don't think he even uses the word God here. But he uses the word self. He doesn't even use the word Brahman. But, if you look beyond the form of it, it's very, very similar. It's like almost the same. So anyway, that's it for right now. And I would love your comments or feedback or questions or anything you have to share about this. And I'm going to post a link to Nan Yar if you want to check it out. What I just did there was I paraphrased it, I shortened it a little bit, but you'll see that when you read it, it's essentially what I just read. So, all right, have a beautiful day, and who am I? Keep on the journey, and we'll see you on the brother side. Thanks.